Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. My name is Brad Groux, co-founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
And my name is Grant Fuellenbach. I am also the co-founder of Go First Consulting.
So thank you, Grant, for joining us. Grant reached out to me, and we work with oil and gas companies, construction engineering companies, blue-collar skilled trades, right? Like, I think that's, being from Houston, that's where we're a blue-collar town. So I think it's a nice introduction that that Grant kind of, the overlap that Grant works within that space too, and has a lot of really interesting takes on how to utilize AI and automation and just different tools and things from that perspective. So Grant, thank you so much. I think I'll just open the floor for you for a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself and let us know a bit more about you, and then we'll dive into the news.
Yeah, sure thing. So my background is in VDC, like visual design construction. I worked for a company called Pix4D, which is in the photogrammetry space, if you guys are familiar with that. Lots of like drone work, right? And through that, I got basically a great familiarity with not only the commercial side, but also the residential side of construction in AEC. And I just saw this tremendous gap of builders and remodelers really doing phenomenal work when it comes to their projects, but struggling to really build out their back end. And, we live in this world of AI now, and it's really it's a phenomenal tool to help overcome a lot of those challenges when used correctly.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we'll dive into this conversation. Again, I have a lot of experience in the AEC space, architectural engineering construction, for people who aren't familiar with that terminology, but in that space as well. We'll dive into that in the conversation. There's just it's really strange because the AEC space is very technologically savvy when it comes to design tools, to drones, like you said, LiDAR, radar, thermal, all those kinds of things from surveying and those and stuff. But like when it comes to the business operation side, they're still very archaic. They're still like for like red line markup tools. So people who don't know, whenever an engineer or an architect has a drawing and they need to mark it up for improvements and look for errors and issues, it's called red line markup. So they literally print it up, the blueprint, and then write with the red. Now they use like a tool like Bluebeam a lot of times, but still there's still a lot of folks who just still print it out, red line markup with a pen and then scan it back in. And so it's a dichotomy between the old school way of doing things and the new school way of doing things. And so I can't wait to dive in this conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and before we do that, I like starting with a little news, like we always do, just to kind of wet the palate, if you will. And then again, a lot of folks just aren't able to keep up with the news, and so I thought I'd dive into a couple of new things. But there was an article published on July 28th, "Building the AI Future with Excel." Kind of building on that, but construction's digital lag risks derailing global data center boom. So basically, data centers are being built by AEC companies, right? These data centers are being stood up within 6 months to a year to meet the AI demands. And these old school companies, the blue collar rich, as we say, that are building these things, those guys with the F-350s and the cowboy boots, and they still operate out of spreadsheets and out of their truck. And it's again, that dichotomy of, you have this cutting edge technology building these world renowned gigawatt data centers, and you still have the old school way of actually building these things, and they're just throwing men at the problem, or man at the problem, manpower, instead of maybe not attacking it the most efficient way. But again, they don't really have time to do that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the big thing from that perspective is, I know, and I'd love to get your insights, Grant. Most of our organizations we work with in AEC and not in AEC, most of their data lives in Excel. It lives in people's inboxes. It lives in people's shared drives or OneDrives or team sites, that kind of stuff. And I'm not really sure how quickly people need to adapt to that, but I think we tell people all the time, your knowledge is your differentiator, your data is your differentiator, and hopefully people will learn to embrace these tools to kind of get out of that mindset.
Absolutely, yeah. It's crazy just how many builders and contractors that I speak with still use the same templated spreadsheet that they've used since they started the company. And I did want to also talk about the point about data centers too. I think that's so interesting because you're absolutely right. A lot of these companies will actually just try and throw more of their labor force at the project. But the other issue, the other side of the coin, is that some of these companies have, gigantic investments in tools like Procore or Bluebeam, like you said, but the adoption just isn't there. The implementation, the onboarding. I mean, I've even seen firsthand, a data centers project in Procore that just didn't. I mean, they even had drone service providers out there doing topographical scans, but the way that that data was conveyed to the rest of the team in Procore, it was like there was no value. It was really interesting.
Yeah, the disparate data systems is really interesting from the AEC space. Again, I work for GMT, which is an engineering firm based out of Baltimore that kind of bought their way into Texas and kind of civil. They're civil engineers, so they build roads and highways and stuff. And I worked on Texas Department of Transportation's Mobility 35 project, which is the 35 billion 30-year project for between San Antonio and Austin. Massive, massive. People's whole careers will be on this one project. And there's the amount of data that's coming in from that, from all these tens of thousands of subcontractors, not even thousands of subcontractors, dozens of years, and just how everybody's doing things differently. And everybody has these different systems. You mentioned Procore. Most of our customers are Procore customers, but they're probably only using 20 or 30% of the actual features. And I think that's, again, most of them are understaffed and they're just flying by the seat of their pants and they don't really have time to sit down and lay that foundation. But I think with AI and automation, the whole point is if you lay that foundation, you'll see a groundswell and you'll be able to utilize those tools better and or replace those tools. If you're only using 20 or 30% of Procore, which is an amazing tool set, I'm not going to say it's not, but it's also a very costly tool set because it's a consumption model. So whatever projects you win, the cost of that project or your profit from that project is what you actually pay a portion of that. It's not just a per license model, which is great for getting your feet wet and stepping in the pool. But like at the end of the day, you're kind of they kind of rake you over the coals at the end of the day. But once you're successful, you're going to keep rolling with that. And like as an example, the Stargate data center in Abilene, Texas, that Oracle and OpenAI building is 5 gigawatts. And I've watched videos from CNBC and others where they have these boots on the ground in Bloomberg, and there's thousands of subcontractors out there running around their little quad wheelers and all this kind of stuff. And just imagine they're building these real live data centers. And again, it's the blue collar workers who are making it happen.
Absolutely.
Building off of the AI data center talks and those sorts of things, President Trump and his White House released their AI action plan for the United States last week. And we actually, if you haven't read what we've said about it, go to digitalmeld.io/blog, and we actually have a blog post about it. We actually applaud what they do, what they've mentioned, but it's removing a lot of those regulations and things that will help speed up this process of building data centers specifically, and scaling up the infrastructure. As an example, we've talked about in South Dakota is wooing data center builders to build their data centers there, and they'll build the natural gas plants to power those data centers right next to it. So you even need transmission lines, those kind of things. And so just the Department of Labor, that's one of the news sources. Again, we'll share these in the newsletter and show notes on Monday after this episode releases, that basically they're applauding the President's AI action plan to help achieve global dominance in artificial intelligence. And one of those ways is helping to boost the infrastructure size. Grant, from your perspective, are you seeing a lot of work in the AEC space being ramped up and people who wouldn't necessarily be involved in this infrastructure projects chase that work?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, especially in data centers. I mean, that is big business right now. You see a lot of these guys who, I would say the biggest crossover is manufacturing, right? People who have a lot of manufacturing experience or working in that commercial space. Those guys are being probably pulled over into these data center build outs simply because they have the closest experience levels to it.
Yeah, that's the odd thing too. These modern data centers aren't like anything that's been built before, right? They have closed loop water systems and all kinds of new fancy electronics and renewable energy sources and stuff. And so I think you have a lot of people just figuring out as they go the SpaceX way, like we say, like SpaceX is doing much like that in Starbase Texas and stuff. They're kind of figuring out as they go and doing things really rapidly. And so that's great. Thanks for those insights. And building on that, our news story is from automate.org, but building the future and how robotics is revolutionizing construction through automation. And this article specifically from automate.org talks about such as robotic bricklaying and 3D printing and those kinds of things. From that space, are you seeing, especially in the SMB space, which I think it's harder in mid-market companies, it's harder for companies to spend millions of dollars on these robotics type systems. But as a drone guy, I see drones behind you right now. I'm sure many are adopting drones or AR or VR or those kinds of things to help expedite their build out process.
Yeah, a lot of it is, it's still, even the drone space, it's still such a new tech way of the adoption, I guess, it depends. It depends on the leadership and it depends on the type of company. Like you said, there are so many new bleeding edge types of technology out there. I saw an automated or a robot that basically will lay down a roof on any style of property. it's amazing. But when you think about the logistics, I just don't know if it will scale fast enough to meet the needs. And the same thing, right? Like drones are absolutely amazing. But right now, I think so many companies are just touching the surface of what's possible with them in terms of, a lot, especially in my market, especially SMB and mid market, these guys are using it for some amount of marketing and some time lapses, but rarely do we see them actually dive into inspection work, even though that is actually where the biggest value lies in overcoming, disputes and liability simply by having that documented source.
Yeah, and again, for the folks that don't know, we as Digital Meld, we actually work with drones or started working with drones and made multi sensors, so lidar, thermal, radar, those kinds of things. As those prices drop, it gets more affordable for companies like ours to say, "Hey, let's go buy a $5 or $10,000 drone that has lidar and start building some vision models and stuff with lidar that could scale up to larger industrial type use cases." And so I think other companies are start doing that as well. But like you said, it's kind of the Wild West. Where do you start, and what can you actually utilize these for? Hopefully, more companies do. I talked to CDO Group, Anthony from CDO Group, a couple weeks ago. They're based out of Chicago. The construction they do, like Applebee's and Arby's and like small commercial construction like that. They do have some larger construction, but he actually brought up a good point that in the future, especially construction and real estate, you're going to actually have a digital footprint for a property, much like you do now. You're going and doing this topographical surveys of these sites. That's going to be attached and live with them for throughout the future of that. And so whenever you can compare it within 5 years or 10 years, much like the government already does with floodplains and things like that, you'll have this historical perspective. But not even that, like you have cameras that are monitoring the amount of traffic outside and those sorts of things. And so over time, you'll have all of this data, terabytes and maybe even petabytes of data for a small residential space or small commercial space. And that's just the future we have, that digital, and you'll be able to do a digital twin and all these crazy thwarted things. And so hopefully that gets the wheel spinning for some folks out there. But again, this is much in a spit and handshake kind of business still as well.
Yeah. It is fun though. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that lots of times I found that the people who I thought would be the least like open to trying these new things are the ones that kind of jump out and just give it a go. They're like, they got to a point where the career, they have the safety of financial stability and stuff like that. Like, let's swing for the fences and see what we do. And I think that's really exciting as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking just a couple of minutes to dive into those conversations about the latest news and trends. Again, for those who are listening, the episode's released every Friday. Every Monday, we release a newsletter on LinkedIn that has all the links that Grant and I will talk about in today's episode. Any kind of resources and stuff like Procore. We've mentioned Procore a couple of times. If you're like, what the heck is Procore? We'll have links to that. And those kinds of things. And so please just check that out. Linktree.com/digital meld is the easiest way to find that. And then again, we'll have all the links to Grant and stuff as well, and basically anything you could ever need from this episode. So now that we've kind of wet the whistle a little bit, I think now we can talk about what Grant really is passionate about, and that's the operational chaos of the skilled trades. And so, what's the day in the life and the reality of SMB contractors and tradespeople in this ever evolving technology landscape?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I'm not going to lie, there's so many challenges right now facing builders, inflation and material costs, labor costs, and competition, you name it. I would say that there's never been a time where it's been more challenging to be a builder. But on the other side of that, there's never been a time where it's as fruitful and it's as, potentially valuable as it is to be a builder nowadays, simply because of the sheer volume of knowledge and tools that you have at your disposal, right? AI just being one of those.
Yeah, and it's funny because again, we talk about the dichotomy between the ones that are adopting these tools and the ones that aren't. A lot of these folks, I have a family friend who runs a concrete business, and it's a super successful concrete. It's just a family business. They make $3 or $4 million a year between the family, and they do everything handshake. Everything's done in a cell phone. And we've tried to talk to them like, hey, we can set up an automation plan for you. They don't even have a website, like that kind of like business. And there's these people that are making this much money doing those types of things, and you just don't see them. And I think those blue collar workers are out there, but then also there's the ones that, hey, let's lay that foundation. Let's start doing things. We talked to a construction company that had been around like 3 years, 4 years, and they were commercial. They did small commercial things as well. And they had 10 folks. And it's like, hey, how are you bidding on projects now? How are you doing? And it was literally, well, I have to stop as the CEO and go do all my due diligence on that. And so we've from some RFP stuff we've automated ourselves. We actually sold us some, built out some of those solutions as well to larger organizations and construction organizations. But that's a huge area that I think you can immediately start automating some things. At least using LLMs to help make your life easier in those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even like OpenAI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, all of these tools that are so commercially available, spend $20 a month and you have such a valuable tool at your disposal. But most of the time, what we find is that, builders, remodelers, people in the trades, even if they have a subscription, they are just touching the very tip of the iceberg with what's possible with these things.
Yeah, and most of the time it's because they're overworked, right? It's man at work, minute work, and money at work, as my dad used to say, and most of them are man or minute work at the most. And so like they're limited by the number of hours they have in a day. And so I think, let's start with that. I think one of the things he brought up is like 3 tools like to automate 10 plus hours of admin work each week. So that an SMB, smaller mid-market construction company would see. Can you just talk about some of those things that you've seen and some of the things you've helped people free up that time to do the more meaningful work and do the more hands-on work?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? Like the number one thing that we hear is just so many of these builders have struggle with, ultimately mapping out a process, mapping out where their workflows are, where there's room for improvement in their workflows. Maybe they don't even have an SOP or anything documented. And, we found that AI is a phenomenal tool for that, just for documenting what the existing process is and then running a risk analysis on that process and saying, with 5% investment into that process, you can make it, 30 times, or you can save yourself, 10, 20 hours, depending on the current workload, right?
Yeah, that's music to our ears, because that's exactly where we always start, is the process. Where are your processes? Are they even documented? If they're not documented, let's start there. And if you don't have time to do that, hey, sit us down with an admin or someone in your organization that kind of understands those things, and we'll sit down and whiteboard it with you. Or like you said, the best part is utilizing these tool sets. Hey, we'll point it to your previous data that you've done, your previous RFPs, your previous project plans and project delivery, your previous like weekly updates that you share with the client. Like, point it to that documentation, and it helps build that narrative for you really quickly to understand that what that process is. Because the goal is to document your processes and then find the lowest hanging barriers of entry, the lowest level, the lowest fruit, hanging fruit that is out there to inject a process in. So you get that immediate ROI. You get that like, oh, this makes sense. I took an hour to figure this out and document this process, and then we took another couple of hours to inject AI at this or automation at this one intersection of that, and then I'm immediately reaping 4 hours a week in return. So on the second week, you're already in the positive. And so you start small, think big. That is literally the reason we started this podcast. Think of like that. You're just building that groundswell. You're pushing the snowball down the hill, and eventually it's going to be a giant boulder, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty amazing how small changes, small incremental changes that are consistently driven over time can, exactly like you said, become that boulder just running itself down the hill.
Yeah, and the goal is like 1% improvement every day, right? Like if you do that every single day, within 3 months, you're operating twice as well as you were. It's that simple. And so it's one of those things that you'll see these things really quickly, and then it gets kind of addictive. And then once you start changing the mindset to think automation first, think AI first, think like, how can I streamline this process? Once you get through a couple of months of doing this, that's how your mind, something's going to switch, and switch is going to flip in your mind. I'm going to think of this automation first. I know this because I did this myself, working with JMT on this $35 billion project. We had data coming from a mainframe from Texas Department of Transportation, and it go to an FTP site and CSV every night and those kinds of things. That's how I started my automation journey. I think it's 2017. And then like, I'd never messed around with automation before. I'd never messed around with the tools and things. And like, I was like, all right, I'm just going to use Power Automate, which was Microsoft Flow at the time, but just every night at midnight, I'm going to grab that from the FTP site and I'm going to upload it to a SharePoint list, that CSV. Like, that's just how I started. And then within 6 months, I had a full-fledged process with a dashboard and all kinds of stuff, and like completely revolutionized this entire reporting. But it didn't start. It's just, you have to take that first step, right? And how can you help convince folks, especially in a place where if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is kind of the mentality on construction sites, I think, a lot. How can you kind of convince them to take that leap?
I think by helping them understand that it is actually broken, they might just not be seeing it, or they're not looking at it through the right lens, like you said, right? But the repercussions of those small incremental changes vastly outweigh the cost of change, the cost of actually doing something a little bit different or trying something new, A/B testing something, right? And sometimes it takes, a cost of inaction calculator, something like that, to actually help them see it through a different perspective.
Yeah, and the beauty of the construction industry too is they live and die by RFPs, right? Requests for bids, or request for proposals, and they have the ability to kind of like say, all right, if you freed up, how long does it take you to submit a proposal? For one, let's figure that out as part of that like documented process, like figuring out what that process is, your SOP for an RFP. What does that process look like? And then with the way I try to focus with them is like, okay, if I free up 4 hours, that gives you half of the next RFP, right? That gives, and so you kind of like, you're able to bid on more work, and once you bid on more work, you're able to win more work, and once you're able to win more work, you're able to hire more subcontractors and kind of build that groundswell. And so that's how I try to, from the folks in that industry, you kind of adapt the conversation based upon what really hits home with them, and that's one area I felt is really meaningful.
Yeah, it's always a foot in the door, right? It's always, understanding where they perceive a challenge, or where they're spending time, or where there's a manual effort. And, like you said, bids, RFPs, that's a very common one, because oftentimes these guys are just getting an email digest, with X amount of projects to potentially bid on. And one of the easiest things you can do is actually just filter out the ones that are not applicable. So then they're focusing on the ones that actually are valuable to them.
Yeah, and one area we also see, obviously, in the construction engineering space, it's universal across pretty much every project, right? You have invoicing and you have timesheets, and those are two areas that they're repeatable, right? So they have a standard timesheet format, you have a standard invoice format. Those are two things you can automate and train AI on very easily and very cheaply. We had a customer where, again, it was a multi-million-dollar project, $100+ million project over 2 or 3 years with local toll road authority here in Houston, and they would get invoices in and timesheets for all the subcontractors and stuff, working on things, and the people were manually entering all that stuff in. And within a week of just sitting out, hey, let's document what that timesheet submission process is. Let's document what that invoice payment process is. Like, what does that look like? And then from that perspective, it's like, hey, let's add. It's going to the AP inbox. Like, that's fine. We can ingest it into a table now, and then make sure everything's correct and function and formatted correctly, and then like we can automate that injection into the ERP system. And so there's a lot of different things you can do. And again, just start, like, if you work in this space, there are things you do every day that's the same, regardless of how many times you do it, how many customers you work with. It's the same. If you're doing something over and over and over, that's the first place to look for automation.
Absolutely.
And another area, I think, and I'd love to get your perspective too, one thing we've seen folks do is to help increase their customer service and customer and client relations. They're able to be more communicative with their clients because they're able to automate things like weekly status reports that takes pictures from the field and takes status reports from Procore or some other tool where they're capturing the data, and it's automatically generating this document at the end of the week that just shoots it off to an email, and they have all of this information directly at their fingertips. Have you seen anything like that in your work that's been help again have people just offer a little bit better service than the rest of others in the industry?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, being proactive in your communication is probably one of the most important things that you can do, regardless if you're in residential or commercial. And, just informing stakeholders, whether that's a homeowner or a PM, of things that are about to happen, things that have happened, things that are currently happening. And there's so many tools out there that allow you to really do a good job of that. Even just having your team really use a like an app on their phones that allows them to take photos or video of the work that they're doing, and then that gets pushed into a larger project context, right, with maybe an AI that kind of helps narrate or really tag the work that's been done. And I know there's a handful of tools out there that kind of accomplish that.
Yeah, one of the areas we've actually seen success too is, again, this is for mid-market, larger companies with 200+ employees, probably, or 100+ employees, is utilizing like Microsoft Copilot to capture meeting notes, and they're able to go back and get that context. And the beauty of that is, whenever you don't have someone who's initially involved with the project, they can go back and you invite them to that previous meeting chat, and they have this historical context. That's such important stuff from these understandings. That's what CRM, client relationship management is all about, is you have that context, whether it lives in HubSpot, whether it lives in what other Procore or another tool set, like you have that historical context that anybody can be ingested or injected into this project and then be up to speed really, really quickly to understand the pain points of the project, the key points of contact, the hurdles that people have had to deal with, those kinds of things. And as long as you're capturing data however you can and you're putting it into a centralized place that other people can see it, I think it's really the key point to drive home. So as someone who I know embraces technology and you're delivering to your clients in the field, what are some tools and or maybe just take us through what like a day in the life for you whenever you're working in the field? What kind of automation tools and things are you using or hoping to implement to improve your relationship with customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, when you're talking about, meeting notes and transcriptions and things like that, I actually use Google's Notebook LM,
Mm-hmm.
if you're familiar with that. And that actually functions almost as my CRM because I'm able to essentially log all engagements, whether it's over email or, a phone call, the voicemail from a transcript, anything like that will actually get pushed into the client specific notebook. And then from there, I can do everything from, helping to draft project scope to understanding timelines to following up automatically, even creating like a visual mind map of everything we've talked about, and then asking the notebook to really dive into that topic if I need to. Or now Google even launched a video tool into Notebook, so I can actually turn it into a full on 8-minute movie if I want.
Yeah, Notebook LM is something we've sung the praises about many times. And folks, if you don't know it, it'll be in the show notes. But notebooklm.google.com. And the beauty is it's a black box LLM basically. So it only gives you responses based upon the information you share with it. So you can create little workspaces too. So you have a workspace for each client as an example. And so it's only going to bring in context from that client. And you like PDFs and contracts you upload and, research papers or stuff that you upload specific to that client or that the research for that job are all based within that. And it doesn't hallucinate nearly as badly as like the open LLMs like OpenAI and things that are going out to the internet and checking things and being force-fed false information and stuff. So highly recommend it. And it's free. You can do a lot of amazing things with it too. So it's one of those things. Definitely do it. I do it all the time with research papers. And so, again, I try to keep up with AI and machine learning and those sorts of things. And it's impossible with all the research papers that come up. And so each time a new research paper comes out for a new vision learning model or something that I've never seen, I'll go download it and I'll upload it to my machine learning notebook LM. And then I'll say, summarize this for me. How does this go back and I ask it questions like, is this relevant to my previous research or work that we've done within the company and those kinds of things. And so it helps me get to speed really, really quickly too. And so I think from that perspective, like, for construction engineering perspective, let's say you do win an RFP. Let's say you have this project and you can bring in, hey, the last time we had one that was very similar to this is the implementation plan we had. This was like the standard operating procedures we have for that. And here's this RFP we just won. Hey, can you duplicate all that for this new one? Does that kind of ways you would see someone using that?
Percent, absolutely. Yeah, I would say that is one of the biggest value adds of it, right? Is just looking at trend analysis. So, you could technically upload all of your previously submitted bids into a notebook and run an analysis on why did we win the ones that we won, and take a look at like the personas, the champions, the people who submitted the bids, just do a full analysis on that in the same way that you could do it for social media too. You could actually use notebooks called RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and it's just one of a myriad of different tools out there. But what's really remarkable about it is it will only, like you said, the hallucination is so low, so the answers that you get really, not only are they cited back to the sources that you input, but they are really directly, from the source. So there's no, I guess, context outside of what you submit. But yeah, there's so many different applications just for doing you can even do a trend analysis if your competitors are on Instagram or Facebook or whatnot. You can grab their, posts from their Instagram profile, look at what posts have outperformed the average, and then do a deep dive into the keywords, when they posted it, how many comments they got, all that stuff. put that in a notebook, and then say, how do I replicate this or make it better?
Yeah, and then also with potential clients as well. I use these LLMs to prepare for meetings, to prepare for this podcast, all those sorts of things. I'll point at someone's LinkedIn page. I'll point it to their website. I'll point to whatever information I can find on them, basically. And
Yeah.
I said, and it's trained over time of like how I like to run a meeting. That I'm a bullet list king. Like that's all I do is bulleted lists, and so it knows the way I like to have my meeting notes done and stuff. And so over time, it's something that would take me 2 or 3 hours to prepare because I'm an over preparer. I hate not having like the answer to a question whenever it's asked to me, especially from a potential client or a client. And so something would take me 2 or 3 hours to prepare for, take me 10 or 15 minutes to prepare for now. And just all that extra time is spent on building a new product or chasing new leads or actually delivering a product to a customer. And so I'm glad you brought up the research aspect of it too, because I think that's something, especially in like the skilled trades position, that maybe they don't do as often as everybody else. The larger companies, obviously, they have teams of people that do those sorts of things. But the ones that 75 people and below, again, they don't have the bandwidth to do those sorts of things. To, hey, I want to go bid on this project. I know this company is going to go do it. What go scrape all the RFPs, especially if it's like government work. You can go get the public RFPs that they've won, and then you can, again, much like that analysis on RFPs you won, go look at the ones RFPs that other people won, and then what I think is even more important is go do the analysis on the RFPs you lost.
Oh,
Like you can learn so much more from your failures than you can your successes, I think, and like that's where these tools come up really well. And so again, hopefully folks are thinking you can use these tools in pretty quick ways to get really great insights, especially like that. I love the research aspect of a lot of these now because all of them have a deep research functionality of some sort. And you say, hey, I just want to do a market analysis between us and our top 3 competitors in our city or our region or our state or those things. And after 10 or 15 minutes, it'll dump out a detailed report of all publicly information for you.
yeah. And so a lot of these tools, a lot of the LLMs will actually give you the ability to create your own custom one, like a custom GPT or a gem if you're using Google's workspace. And one thing that we found, which is really just a tremendous value add, quick win, is to create a custom GPT that acts as a deep researcher. So basically, it functions as a McKinsey analyst, right? Someone who it the prompt itself, I think, is probably 6 pages long, just in the sheer amount of detail. But the PDF, it's basically a PhD thesis on any topic that you could want. Sourcing, we use Google quite a bit, and so the gem or the research that we get back usually cites through about 250 plus web pages. So the PhD document, it's gigantic. It's maybe 50 pages as a PDF, but it's super valuable because you can just take that and then put it into a tool like Notebook and have it digest it really seamlessly for you.
Yeah, for people who aren't aware, McKinsey, they speak of as McKinsey and Company. So basically, they're the kings of the business analyst space. And then they're also management consulting. So whenever a company lays off a bunch of people, they'll bring in McKinsey and Company to be the bad guys and lay off them. I'm talking about Fortune 100 type companies. But the beauty is McKinsey and Company has like we run our business like in the way that the frameworks that McKinsey and Company have proven work. And so like we offer the Goldilocks. Like whenever we offer a customer, it's like hot, medium, cold, or expensive, right, mid-market, like cheap. Like we give them 3 options and 3 options only, and that's what McKinsey says. And so if you go do these things, whether it's McKinsey or Gartner has similar frameworks, and Forrester and those other folks, and you can train these models on those sorts of things, and it'll give you the output that people would nearly McKinsey and Company, like they've been releasing these PDFs and stuff for years, or people have been subscribed to their management pipeline and stuff, and like now people are trained the models to be just as good as them, and you don't have to pay them hundreds of millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to come in and do these things. And that's the beauty. Again, the small business and mid-market companies have access to these executive Fortune 100 type consulting because you have this model that you could train really, really quickly to be an expert in the space.
And it's not just, high end, or it doesn't even have to be that complex of topics. Like one topic that I usually will utilize is like building science. So I'll have a bot that will actually go through and grab super relevant YouTube videos from builders talking about, a new cutting edge best practice that they're using to install a window, right? And then I'll bring that automatically into a notebook just so it's, top of mind. It's highly relevant and highly recent even.
Yeah, and the beauty is as you're building all of this internal context for your company to help your company succeed more, then you can also grow your digital footprint and your client visibility and your client trust by sharing a lot of those insights. So can you talk about how you've used some of these tools to help boost the visibility on social media and or just publishing white papers or blog posts and stuff, and how that streamlined that process and made that much easier and faster for folks to do?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things I would say that has helped us the most is when we started, I always like to everything I try and do, I try and revolve around a problem, right? And so with our audience being builders, most struggle with one of six core components, either, and those can be anything from marketing all the way down to like talent acquisition and retention. And so those core competencies, I basically added to a content calendar and said, help me generate some content ideas using, Instagram reels, Instagram posts, carousels that I can replicate on Facebook and LinkedIn, and also YouTube shorts that revolve around these six topics, these six problems, because I knew that these were going to be applicable to builders. And then from there, we, dove in even further into it's not just the pain point isn't just surface level. We need to get into the actual emotional and root cause of that problem. And so that alone has really helped just create a consistent workflow when it comes to social media. And then adding in tools like I use one called Tella or Riverside. This podcast is a great one because there are AI capabilities within it that help streamline a lot of the way that content can be produced. You don't need a full camera crew following you around a job site. Really, most of the time, all you need is just to pull out your phone and, get consistent with taking some photos of the work that you're doing or telling the story of why you're doing it.
Yeah, and I think I follow on YouTube the Perkins Builder Brothers. I'm not sure if you know those guys, but there's just a small crew that would build houses, and then they started recording it, and like they make far more money from their YouTube than they ever did from building houses because they were just people love skilled labor. Like I've how many of us have stayed up late at night till 2 a.m. like watching people weld on YouTube or watching people create tables, like and do epoxy tables on you, like all that stuff. Skilled labor is just so fascinating because it's out of the reach for most of us because it's a skilled trade. It takes 10,000 hours, right, to be an expert. You can't just pick up an LLM and learn how to be a woodworker. It'll give you a good roadmap for how to be a good worker, but you have to go through the steps. And I think as AI, the rise of AI is happening, I think skilled tradesmen, we're already seeing it now. It's going to cost you more for a plumber and an electrician than it ever will a doctor or a lawyer. And that's just because the younger generations kind of frowned on the blue collar work whenever, I'm from Houston, Texas, where we have the carcinogenic coast, right? Where I grew up where all the chemical plants are, and we call it redneck rich. These people make $150,000 a year, have $100,000 trucks and $200,000 boats, and like living the good life, and so people look down upon it. And I think that's one reason I probably have fallen in line with the AEC's space as well, is because you have these just good, hardworking people who are very successful and very smart and do a lot of good things with the little that they have. And I love that these tools are going to help them. And the content marketing is such a special one because, again, we do use Riverside for this. And so we're recording this episode on a Thursday. I'll have it edited overnight because the AI helps me edit it on Riverside, and it'll be released tomorrow morning on Friday. And then starting next Monday through Friday, I'll have a 60-second clip of Grant on all of our social media. And it does all that. I can do that in probably an hour or two, where before it would, to manually do all this stuff would take me hours and hours and hours. And that's one reason it took me so long to start a podcast. It's like, oh, I got to hire an editor. And like, I have my own taste. And so I'm not going to really like how an editor does things. And so use these tools. Like you said, take your phone out. I have a nephew who has a window cleaning business. And I was like, just start taking people, have your wife go out there and record you doing window cleaning. And it's taken off because people do like people who put in the hard work. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's like, to your point, there's so many success stories in this space, like 30 by 40, Modern Craftsman, build.com. These are guys who grew up, no different probably than you or I, working and just building things, right? But then they've been able to share those stories in a channel and actually make it work for them to the point where they've grown these empires basically and have such a vast following by other builders, even like stay-at-home moms who are just, looking for best-in-class ways to do a kitchen remodel. Tons of different applications.
Yeah, and I can already hear some or see some, construction guys, project managers stuff are out in their F-350s on job site, like rolling around. Like, I'm never going to take the time to do this. Hey, just use ChatGPT. Go to ChatGPT and say, this is what I do. Here's my project that I'm working on. It's you're working on a project that's probably $10 million. Like, you're working on this mega project and you're managing all that kind of stuff. People are going to want to see what they're doing. What can I do from a social media perspective, to show that to the world in a way that's beneficial for myself and my company? And it's going to give you a little roadmap. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. Like you said, you were planning your content calendar, right? There's no reason you can't use these tools to do that. And then just go through the steps. I challenge you, like, go record a video, do this sort of thing. I have another nephew who's a pilot, and I'm like, I've given him 5 different cameras. I'm like, dude, please start recording. Like, you're a pilot, you're 20 years old, you have 600 flight hours. Start recording. Zach, if you're listening, go freaking record. I know he's going to be listening. So
there, those are really.
I've given him 3 different GoPros and a gimbal and all kinds of stuff, and it's just like you'll regret and going back, like, hey, I didn't capture all that. And to me, it's a data point, right? So how best as a pilot to like learn to look, then going back and look at your stuff. And the same thing from the guys working on the job site. Hey, how I did stuff 2 years ago, it just gives you cringe. Like, how I did my first podcast is not how I'm doing my 21st podcast. Like, right. You're growing. And I think this is really important. And folks need to know that data is your secret sauce.
So on that note, I actually built a little web app called Site Story that its goal is to hit 2 birds with the same stone. And so, you plug in your project, the scope, duration, all that, and it will pop out a phase by phase checklist. And the checklist, each task on it has, take a photo of this, do a video of that, 60 seconds of that. But it tells you exactly why you need to do that for marketing capabilities and how to use that as a marketing collateral. But it also tells you why it's important to overcome disputes and potential liability failures, right?
Yeah, CYA is so important. People are like, you're Brad, you're too out there, you're too open, you're too honest. I use my real name, and I'm the only person in the name world of Brad Groux, and I've used it for 25 years. I'm like, well, it keeps me honest, for one. Like, I can't go out there and just lie. And then people are like, hey, that guy Brad Groux, he's a freaking liar. And then that's a top Google search result. And so I think I definitely come from the CYA, cover your ass, for people who don't know, school of thought. And so I do like that too. Like, I would love to hear more about this tool, and we'll provide a link to that. So please share that with me, and we'll put it in the show notes, because that sounds like something that'd be really beneficial for people. And I like the fact that you put like why it's important. So over time, it becomes second nature, right? They understand why they're making those decisions and doing those things.
Oh, absolutely. And it's actually a free tool I released on NAHB, or the National Association of Home Builders, last week. But what's kind of fun about it too is it helps you actually adopt the tool too. It'll tell you how many of the boxes you've checked over time, and help you kind of gamify it in a way.
That's fantastic. And I love that, again, it's out there and it's free. Again, we tell people all the time we're building a cult of AI. I'm trying to spread the word. And because I think the more people that know about AI and automation, the better it is for everybody. The more free time people have, the more people they're going to need us eventually. Put good things out there, good things are going to come back. And so that's awesome. I think that's really great. And I can't wait to take a look at that and share that within our show notes. And so for folks, make sure you hit to linktree.com/digitalmeld and get access to those show notes and get access to that tool. I'm definitely going to take a look at it and see how it can help us, because we do have projects. So maybe it's not like projects out on the job site, but we have projects that maybe we can utilize some of those things too. I can't wait to put it through spaces.
Yeah, very cool.
Awesome. I think we've had a great conversation. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm done on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just say thanks for the great conversation. There's a lot of great insights and great ways, I think, for people to get started. I think we can, as we wind down here over the next 10 minutes or so, I think we could get off to what we call a rapid fire round. So just ask some quick questions, get some quick answers, and kind of see where things go. You up for that?
Absolutely. I love it.
So the first one I think is really approachable. The first AI tool you recommend to every small business?
Notebook, 100%. Yep.
Notebook. That is at the top. I talked to people. I was talking to some students at Texas A&M University at an event last week, and I was telling them, "You haven't tried Notebook LM? Try that." I think it is one of the hidden gems of the entire market. And again, because it's based on your context, it's not the crazy stuff that it's been trained on the internet. And so that's an awesome one. So again, we'll have the link to that in the show notes. What's one common mistake tradespeople make when approaching tech?
That's a good one. They generally don't have an adoption process. They haven't thought through how it's going to affect, or how the team will adopt it in terms of change management, right? They don't have a champion. They don't have what are called like beta testers or a team of early adopters. And so generally what they'll do is they'll pay for a really expensive tool and then give everyone access at the same time, only for it to kind of crumble and everyone to revert back to whatever it was that they were doing before.
Yeah, that hits so close to home with a lot of the stories we hear from our clients and stuff. And I think because a lot of these decisions are made at the top down, right? Some executive made a decision or a leader made a decision, say, hey, we're going to use this for the whole company without actually talking to what we call the boots on the ground. And so all conversations about what tools you should adopt. Hey, if you're at a management, a management conference or you heard about on the golf course, that's great, but bring it to your team first and say, here's what this tool does. Take a couple of weeks. Can you guys just dive into this and see how this could integrate to our workflow? Because if you don't get that groundswell, if you don't get that buy-in and have those champions or evangelists, then again, people are going to use 20 or 30% of that product. And then is it really helping your organization? Because then there's still the manual process in that process. So I love that you always start with the standard operating procedures. Like, what's your standard operating procedure for adoption? SOPs. If you don't have an SOP, use these tools to build that SOP and then worry about adoption.
Exactly.
And so, I know in this space, there's a lot of solopreneurs, right? So you have folks out there who are one-man shops for their own businesses and stuff too. But do you have like a favorite automation hack for a two-person team or a small team, like let's say less than 5 people?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of just like project management hacks, tips and tricks there. And so I use a tool called Todoist, which is just a to-do list, right? But it has a lot of cool features ingrained in it. And what I'll do is I'll actually, anytime I'm taking on a new project or if I'm looking at my current workload, I'll take it and I'll actually deploy like what's called a RICE method, or it's a style of prioritizing the tasks that you're doing every day. So similar to like a critical path, but more for the business operations rather than actual build outs. And what it will do is actually help you understand why certain tasks are super important based off of, so RICE stands for reach, impact. So reach is number of people that task will ultimately help influence or touch. Impact is it actually going to help financially to the business or to your bottom line? C is confidence. So based off of my skill sets, based off of my timeline, my abilities, how confident am I in my ability to get this done when I need to get it done? And E stands for effort. So how hard is it going to be to actually build this thing out or to do whatever it is? And so that's something that I generally will just deploy, or I even have it in a gem or a ChatGPT. So basically, anytime I'm taking on a new project, I'll just feed it to that RICE module. And that sounds weird, RICE module, but it will basically help me determine if that's actually the right course or the right thing to be focusing on.
No, that's another great one, because again, RICE is something that can be used. It's a funny thing because it can be used like in a skill trade. It can be used for any kind of project or task orientation. So it's used in DevOps a lot. I know Intercom, the AI service desk tool and kind of stuff, like they have a prioritization for like product managers. We used to be one of their customers, so I still remember reading that. But then also, like you said, it's like a management, it's a McKinsey type thing. It's like looking at things holistically and getting those things. I think that's really great. Again, we'll provide links to that so you can learn more about that. I highly encourage folks to use those tools. And much like we've trained our contract writing or proposal writing for our customers on McKinsey's ways, you can train your project management and task management on like RICE and things to, hey, once you dump in your actual, one project, your one proposal, say, hey, utilizing the way we used RICE previously, like, hey, build us out the task list for that. So that's another great advice.
And if you're using Gantt charts, it really helps, just visualize the kind of a little bit more accurate depiction of what you have in your Gantt chart, right? Like who's responsible for what, timelines, estimates, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's all great stuff. Another great one. I too am like a project management hack. I was like, because Elon Musk, for all his flaws, he says the best process is no process. And again, we're always trying to whittle down those processes, and processes are important, but you should always be trying to streamline that as best as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. Best advice you've ever received about scaling a service business.
That's a really good one. I'll actually piggyback off of what you just said, right? One of the hardest things to do about scaling, or when you think you need to scale, is actually to simplify. So reduction and simplifying not only your offer, but your pitch, your website, even your brand, your voice style guide, all of that, simplifying it down can actually be one of the most difficult things to do. But if you have three directions that you want to go and you are able to minimize that down to one, I think this, maybe Alex Hormozy actually had a podcast about this recently, but if you can whittle it down to one, that is actually aligning every single person on your team towards that one mission, towards that one goal. And so you don't have to question if people are in alignment or on task to hit their goal, because you are all focused on that same directive.
No, that's great. Alex Hormozy, for the people that don't know, is the acquisition.com guy. He's really his great advice on management and prioritization and building and scaling your business and stuff on YouTube. Again, we'll provide links to that because I think that's keep it simple, stupid. I have ADHD and I'm extreme detail in everything I do. My notes are crazy. People look at that and like, oh my God, this guy's insane. And I have to always remember, like, not everybody thinks like I do, right? Like, scale it down. Because whenever we started this business, whenever we were doing RPs, we're like, hey, we're just going to give them everything and every question they could ever ask. There would be nothing left unknown. But then it was just too much. It's overwhelming. It's like, what do I do? And so I think there is something to be said that keep it simple, stupid, like simplify, reduce. And I think another great piece of advice.
I'm very similar to you, just organically, like in terms of how I take notes and how I think, I guess. And I actually stole this from a company called Supered. I just call it the Supered format, but it's their bluff. So it's bottom line up front, and then everything that all emails, everything that's transcribed is actually just in very, very short bullet points that always start with like the topic. And even in correspondence with clients, that has been so much more helpful because it's so much easier to digest. People don't have to skim. They don't have to spend time or ignoring the message more than likely. And it's actually just, here's what we talked about. Boom, boom, boom. Here's what the issues are. Boom, boom. And here's the next step. Boom.
Yeah, a lot of my obsession comes from being a contract IT guy in my early career, like the CYA. Like I didn't ever want to be someone say like, oh, you didn't do that. Like, oh yeah, I did it here at this time at this day. Like the weather was this. I want to always have that like CYA aspect. I was burned a couple times really early in my career, and like I've been obsessive about that. And so what I've done, much like you, I feel kind of personally attacked by what you just said, but I'm just kidding. Because I would do those long like walls of text emails leaving and so what I do, I have an executive summary at the top, like exactly what you said, 3 or 4 bullet points. And it's like the details are below if you care. Like maybe 1 in 10 people do, but I put them there just because that's just, at least I put it there, but so CYA, but like this is all you need to worry about. And if you're crazy like me, you can read the rest of it. And I've gotten overwhelming positive things to that too. So again, we'll find the links to that, put in another great one. So thank you for sharing. So the last one of this, quick fire round, rapid fire round, which hasn't been so rapid because I can't shut up. What is an AI prediction that excites you the most? What are you looking forward to? It doesn't necessarily have to be within the AEC space, or just what are you looking forward to over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely. I think learning, like there's this concept called just-in-time learning. So JIT as another acronym. And I really like that topic because it's basically, it's this concept of you're in a conversation with your wife, your fiance, your partner, and you're debating something, and everyone's familiar with like, oh, just ask Google or pull out your phone or whatever. But the just-in-time learning is basically that, but for a tradesman or a craftsman or a skill set. It's instead of having to look up how to do a VLOOKUP or a macro in Excel, if you're using that, you can actually have a database that teaches you how to do it almost like before you have to do that algorithm or that macro or whatever. And so it's literally like, as the name implies, just in time, right when you need it, you can learn how to. It's kind of like the Matrix, I guess, right? Well, I have to fly this helicopter off of this rooftop, so I need to learn how to do that. That's actually what I'm probably most excited about, is just the applications that come from that.
Yeah, that is an interesting take, because again, as these models learn more about you, as your assistant on your phone becomes an actual personal assistant that's always listening. The movie Her, Spike Jonze movie with Joaquin Phoenix, one of my favorite movies of all time. And as dystopian as it is, it's because like I think we'll eventually get to that point where you have this companion that's always there and always listening if you want it. And some people aren't going to want that. Me, if anybody's can keep up with what's going on in my head, I need them. So I'm all for it. But I think, again, people are just inundated with information. And it is, you don't need it until you need it. And so I think that's a great one as well. Don't waste your time and spinning cycles on something that you don't need until you actually need it. I think that's another great one. So those were all great feedback from those. And so I think, as we wind down here with the final round, as we say, is like, what's just 1 to 2 practical recommendations you have to, for a first automation task for someone in the AE space to just try? No excuses. Like, it's this simple. Give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's nothing new, right? Like, in terms of just look at where you're spending time in Excel or in a Google Doc or in a Google Sheet. And you don't need any fancy Chrome extension to help you time it, but just make a mental note of, I'm spending X amount of hours. I have to export this into a CSV or whatever it is. Make a mental note of that and try and document, I guess, over time, how much time, I guess, over a week, or a month, how much time you're actually dedicating to that one manual process. And it oftentimes it's just as easy as saying to ChatGPT or Google or whatever, here's what I'm currently working on. Here's my process. Do you have any ideas on how to make it better? Right. And it might recommend some complex or more complicated workflows like N8N or build a Zapier or something like that. But it might also just say you could actually streamline it by doing this one small thing.
Yeah, the living in spreadsheets, I think, is again something that most people in the business world, regardless of whether it's blue collar or sitting behind a desk every day, can kind of relate to. And most of the data that lives in there can be somewhere more accessible and easier to adapt and update and stuff. And so use these tools to kind of just spitball those, upload the Excel spreadsheets that you work in and be like, I'm looking for a way to automate 2 or 3 things in this. And it'll know just from looking at the tables. It'll know from looking at the pivot tables and the formulas and stuff. It'll know pretty quickly. They can read Excel very, very well. It'll give you some ideas to at least get that started. So that's a great one. Like, hey, just start there. Start with we tell people all the day, what's something you do for 5 minutes every day that you wish you could automate? And let's start there. Like, that's something that simple. And we can make that happen. Again, even if it's something that's you're offline in the middle of, we've had folks working on drill sites in West Texas, and they don't even have Starlink at that certain site or whatever. It's like, all right, we can do some desktop automation that still moves the keys around for you. We can make anything happen. But yeah, no excuses. You can do this. Like, if you could free up 5 minutes of your day every day, that's 25 minutes a week. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot. And that initial lift is probably 10 or 15 minutes. It's not like 5 hours to figure out how you can free up that 5 minutes. So that's great. Just get started. Start small, think big, like we say.
And chances are that 5 minutes is actually a gross overestimation. They're probably spending at least half an hour on it.
Yes. Yeah. It's rose-colored glasses, right? Like, I only wasted 5 minutes doing that. I don't know how many rabbit holes I go down every day. Great. Okay, awesome. So again, the last thing I would say is avoiding common AI adoption traps. Where have you seen people stumble out of the blocks? For us, it's like people trying to bite off more than they can chew, or just trying for the swing for the home run right out of the bat. And more than that, small iterative approaches. What have you seen?
Yeah, I think there's 2 frames of thinking about it. Like, some people acknowledge AI for just being another tool in their tool belt, right? It can be used as kind of a better spreadsheet, a better way of getting data acquisition or thinking through marketing, whatever it is, just another series of tools. The other way of thinking about it is kind of like a magic bullet. And generally what I find is people who think about it as being a magic bullet are the ones who fail the fastest, because, it's kind of like dieting, I guess, right? Like taking Ozempic or something like that. It's probably not going to change your life. It might have some, immediate effects, but in the long term, it's probably not going to be the be all to end all in terms of, in that case of dieting. It's not going to get you to where you want to be without, hard work and changing other things along the way.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, especially in the AEC space where, skilled tradesmen, they use tools. AI is just a tool. It's just another tool in your tool belt. It's like going from, your analog hammer, your clawed hammer or ball peen hammer to a nail gun, right? Like that iterative approach. Eventually there could be robots that come nail everything for you. But like what we're talking about is like, just go buy that nail gun. Spend the $200 to buy that nail gun, and it's going to save your arm. It's going to save you tendonitis and those kinds of things, and save you 30 or 45 minutes a day of just nailing in the old way. Just think of AI the same way.
Learn how to use it. Learn how to use the nail gun too.
Yeah.
Same time.
Yeah, read the manual, or at least go ask ChatGPT to read the manual for you.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing, is like understanding how the basic core concept of why that nail gun is a nail gun and how it works, and it'll let you know, like, because we can go back to that analogy, but like, if you understand the inner workings of that nail gun, you understand like why it jams, why you're overheating it, those types of things. AI is very much the same way. You need to know the constraints. Like you said, with hallucinations, if I have something that can't hallucinate, it'd be too embarrassing if it wasn't, if it's 80% accurate, 99% accurate, go to Notebook LM. Don't go to ChatGPT. Like, take those extra steps and know what those guardrails are.
Absolutely. I love that. Perfect analogy.
Awesome. Well, again, I could keep talking to you all day, Grant, and I thank you for your time. And so at this end of this conversation, I just want to open the floor to you for 2 or 3 minutes, just to let people know your call to action, let people know more about you, where they can find you, your next steps, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the free resources and tools that we develop are actually found on our brand site called Beyond the Bid. So if you type that in on Google or your browser, it should pop up. And that's where you'll find like that tool, the site story. I have like an ultimate home building checklist, a bunch of other assets that are pretty cool for builders or even just people who are interested in this space, as well as like a link. I think there's links on there to all the different tools that we use. And yeah, again, if you're interested in any of this, if you're a builder, remodeler, contractor looking to, adopt some of these practices and learn more. I think I'm the only Grant Fuellenbach on LinkedIn I know. So I'm pretty much always available on there, or just type that name in on Google too. And either one or one of my clones will pop up.
Awesome. Yeah. So beyondthebid.co, it'll be on the screen as I'm saying that, and then also it'll be in the show notes. I just looked at it. Those tools are great. We'll be taking a look at those as well. So again, Grant, thank you so much for being a part of this journey and for sharing your insights and letting folks know that this is approachable even for the boots on the ground, as we say, and that they can take a swing for the fences and help increase the bottom line, or they can just take that small incremental step every day to. We call it, like, we're training you for a marathon, right? Like, couch to 5Ks first. Get up off the couch first. Walk to the mailbox and back, and then slowly make your way to where, hey, you can jog, and then you can run, and then you can actually make it for an entire marathon, which I would never do. But
I know those people are crazy.
Yeah. And so again, thank you, Grant, for joining us, and we hope you join us for next week's conversation, and you reach out to us. Again, all the links and discussions we talked about, Grant has shared a tremendous amount of knowledge here. There will be in the newsletter that's on Monday. Linktree.com/digitalmeld is where you'll get the links to the newsletter, or just search Digital Meld on LinkedIn, and you'll find us, or myself on LinkedIn as well. Again, look up Grant on LinkedIn, go to beyondthebill.co, and hopefully he can help you start small, think big as well in your AEC space.
Amazing. Thanks, Brad.
Yep. So that's a wrap for folks. We appreciate you, and we look forward to talking to you next week. Bye-bye. We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io, or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.